On My Own Side is our theme. Inner nurture is our topic today. Dr. Rick Hanson, many of you are familiar with him. He wrote The Buddha's Brain and a bunch of really great books. And I interviewed him a few times in prior years with the Radical Recovery Summit. And I think this was from the first or second time. He really covers a lot of the brain, what's happening in the brain, what's going on. So he's a psychologist, but he really specializes in the neurobiology of the brain. And he suggested to really try to gather support for ourselves. We have this inner critic, which seems to take up a lot of space in our head. And then we also could bring in other resources to help our adult self deal with that. So we have this harsh interior voice that is not telling us the truth. It's a conditioned voice. Oftentimes we've taken over from a parent, or that voice is one of our parts is trying to make us play small. And so here's the situation that many of us are in, and it doesn't have to stay that way. I don't have that going on in my head anymore. And this is partly why sometimes I would do this as a practice as well. I just put some people at the bottom and my dog as well, who for me are somewhat nurturing and who I can look to for support and for different kinds of support. So sometimes, it's a dear friend who's honest with you and really loves you and who is much kinder than you are to yourself. Audre Lorde is a person right beside Thich Nhat Hanh there, who's a radical lesbian feminist. I started reading her books, I think, in the 80s. Wonderful example of courage and intelligence and commitment to social justice. So there's a whole bunch of people. Michelle Obama comes to mind now as someone who models that. So whoever that might be for you, maybe you could give that a moment and see who pops into your mind. If you were to have 2 or 3 or a dozen, who would you bring in to support you that you could ask for advice? We're going to do this virtually, so it doesn't have to be somebody you know in real life. But if you were to set up an inner nurturing committee, who and what might be on that? And if you don't have a lot of people coming to mind right now, that's okay. You could just let that kind of percolate a little bit and see who might come in and keep your eye open for that as well. As you're going through your days and weeks ahead, notice, oh, I really like what that person has to say, or my sister-in-law really stood up for her kid. I admire that, or whatever that may be, You could look out for that. So the next thing, once you have your committee, and you might still be gathering them, where might you meet with them? You could imagine that you're meeting, this is a picture of a place that I had in British Columbia when I lived out in the West. And every time I'd walk into that little meadow at the top and there's a lake in the background, I would just feel so at home. I felt really safe there. And the smell of the moss in the summer and the sun, and it's just a place for me that really brings enjoyment, but also I feel really safe there. So it could be anywhere for you. So again, let's take a moment and sense into who that might be. It might be your heart center. It might be your home. Or you might not really have a background. You might just kind of visualize the people or your dog or whoever it is. And once you have a place, then visualize your inner nurturing community. We live in community. We really love being in community, even though it's a very risky thing to do and it can be scary. It's so necessary. So take a minute to really sink into your body and then let all of your senses bring that to life. So you might have your eyes closed and visualize the scene, and who is it that's sitting there with you? What are the sounds, the smells? What do you touch? And with this kind of a practice, we're working with ideal. These people are always here for you when you need them. They're always supporting you. They're kind, they're honest. They encourage you to act in your own best interest and to see clearly. So they're not having a bad day. They're not grumpy or something. So just imagine, bring that to life in your mind. the place, the people, other beings. It might be nature itself. Let's see if you could have at least one or two people or other beings there as well. Let yourself breathe. And take as long as you like before you move into this next step. So you might want to take another minute or two to really pause and look at each person. Look into their face, notice their body language. Maybe say hello. Maybe your circle is going to introduce themselves to each other. You might give them an introduction, why they're here. When it feels right, let your inner circle include the inner critic. So you could have a place, a chair, or whatever for the inner critic. Or you might just have an energy of that. Not everybody has visuals like that of an internal process. However, that shows up for you, invite them into the conversation. And for now, you're not going to really ask them to talk right at the moment. You're going to introduce why you brought them in, however that might be for you. To include something like, I've invited you here because I want to know what's going on. I want you to know that I'm not going to let you shame me. So if you're mean and nasty, I'm not going to listen. And these other people that are here as well are going to protect me from that. So you're not going to shut me down. You're not going to put me into shame. I'm clear. I'm strong. I'm grounded. And when you use that kind of voice on me, when you show me contempt, I can't have you here if you're going to do that. So come into the circle, be here, and I want to know what your concerns are. When you're bringing something to my attention, what is it you want me to know? Here, we're really staying in that witnessing, fully aware that we're here in this moment, we're doing a practice. If anything starts to get too intense, open your eyes, stop the practice, look around, hold your hand, get regulated again, do some cyclic sighs. We're going to give this several minutes. You might bring forward a specific thing. When you call me stupid, what's going on around that? Why do you think I'm stupid? What's your evidence for that? Or how are you trying to help? How is that helpful? Is it? There's several things that we could ask. So if your inner critic was to say something like, well, you were never that smart at school. I'm not surprised that you're having trouble understanding things at your job. You shouldn't have gotten that job. It's too much for you. You're too stupid. I'm just telling you the truth. Quite often, when those kinds of accusations come up, the evidence might be loosely based on something that happened in the past, but does it really apply now? So maybe when you were a child at school, you had a learning disorder, or maybe you never got to sleep because there was too much fighting in your house. That's not the situation anymore. Now you have the money and the ability to hire some help or to ask for help at work or to Google it or whatever. Stay with a couple, one and then maybe two or three others over this time. Just look at what it is, what's the evidence, and how does it really apply now? Is it true? Might be something that you could pay attention to. Notice what your experience is with that. And let the other members of your committee help as well. Maybe you have a hard time coming up with a reason why that doesn't apply anymore, but maybe one of them would. Let them stand up for you. If one of the members of your committee seems to have some experience with this, you could ask them, what is it that I need to know here? What am I seeing? How could I see more clearly? What am I not seeing? And a lot of the time, our inner critic is using perfectionism as a weapon. And that's really common with children who've been judged and made fun of or shown contempt by parents or teachers. We have this drive that has to be perfect or I can't risk doing it at all. And that is something that other people could help us with. I've made lots of mistakes just like that. Or you made a mistake. What can you do to repair it? Let's focus on that. Could you offer yourself some kindness? This inner nurturing circle, they don't have hidden agendas. They don't want you to be a doctor because that's what they weren't, or they don't have any of that. They're just here to help, to let you know the wisdom that they have, the way they see it. You might not see it the same way. That's fine. And if you realize that you are out of alignment, maybe you're in a job that you're really not suited for, or maybe you're hanging around with a social circle that you're not really happy with. They're not really your kind of people anymore. If you're out of alignment, what would that feel like in your body? How do you know that? And let's take a moment to come up with what would bring me into alignment. It might be something quite simple or it might be something big. If I'm out of alignment, instead of shaming myself, I could just look and say, well, course correction, what do I need to do here that's different? And then ask for help. What do your committee see? Maintain awareness that you're here in this moment. You're doing a practice. If you need to take a break from it, that's fine. Get up, shake it off, look around. If you're getting inundated by criticism, ask your supporters to help you stand up to that. You might know what to say too. Just like, no, that's not the deal here. You need to speak nicely to me if you want me to know this. You're trying to warn me about something? That's fine. I'd like to know what your concerns are so that I can look at the evidence, so that I can see if perfectionism is at play. If I can see, is this a voice that I heard a lot when I was a child? Was I shamed for that? I want to know what the deal is, but I don't want you to be harming me while you're telling me. This is something that we could do and come back to again and again in kind of a formal way like this, or maybe just with one or two of them. When you're working with something, you notice the inner critics in there. Pause, get yourself grounded again, oriented, and then ask some of these questions. Ask for support and wisdom from an actual friend who can do that in words, or from some of these people that you admire. How would they approach this situation? How would they see it? This is just to sum it up. So, how to work with this. So, the inner critic is often a fear underneath that, and it has a lot to do with shame, and it can be quite harmful. We want to be able to know about the inner critic, know what their motivation is. We also want to do a practice of being alert for signs that they're here. If we're having memories that are coming up to prove to us that we're no good, or we have that mean voice or contemptuous voice, then notice that. Same as our body, we might be, our shoulders are up around our ears or something. So we're really being bullied by our inner critic. If we were to just sit for a minute with, it's safe now to let this go and nurture a kind, loving relationship with myself. It's safe now. Then notice that. What does that feel like?